Hey friends, Pastor David here with this week's Midweek Minute. So we are in the midst of this series called Fearless, working to understand the fears that come our way and the power of fear in our lives and what Jesus gives us to offset that fear. He gives us Himself. Remember, the prescription for fear is the presence of God. We talked this past weekend a little bit about a story from Genesis chapter 1 about Hagar and Ishmael, and how Hagar, when she reached the end of her rope, when all of the resources that she had from a human standpoint of things were exhausted, God meets her right there at that place of uncertainty, at that place where she's hanging on and doesn't feel like there's much underneath her to support her. God meets her right there. And God provides for the moment where she is. And then God helps her see that as much as she feels like this is the end of the line, God says, oh no, your story does not end here. This is just a hard moment on the journey, but there's so much more to come for you and for your son Ishmael. We talked about the fact that there are a lot of different times in our lives when we might feel like we're at the end of our rope, and that rope can be named a lot of different things. We talked about that some this weekend. That rope can be named financial depletion. It can be named struggling with an illness of some kind. It can be named the whole business of change itself, how we deal with that. Sometimes changing things can make us feel like we're at the end of our rope. We talked about the fact that sometimes that rope that we're hanging from is simply this world that seems like it's gone crazy. But we discovered that the God that met Hagar at the end of her rope has not changed one little bit. Psalm 102 says, the heavens pass away and the foundations of the earth pass away, but God remains the same. God's years do not come to an end. So if that's true, the good news I want to offer you is that if God met Hagar at the end of her rope, God's going to meet you at the end of yours. And God's going to tell you, look, this isn't the end of your story. Even if we face that ultimate enemy, death itself, that is not the end. That is just a transition into life eternal. God is about meeting us where we are and providing resources for us. But then we talked about the fact that the resources God gives us are always so that we can give it away to somebody else who finds themselves at the end of their rope as well. So I hope you'll do two things this week. I hope that you'll realize that when you feel like there's nothing left to go with, open your eyes, because watch, God's going to show up in that place. And then when God does show up in that place to provide for you when you're at the end of your rope, ask God to help you see the people in your life that are at the end of theirs, so that you can offer to them what God has given to you. This coming weekend at First Church, we're going to be talking about another thing that creates fear in our lives, and that's when life kind of harasses us. You know, you don't get to the end of your rope overnight. You get to the end of your rope because life just kind of throws punches at you and harasses you over the course of time. We're going to talk about what to do when life harasses you and the fear that sometimes comes along with that this weekend. I hope that you can be with us either on Saturday night at 6 o'clock or Sunday morning at 10:30 or at either one of our online campuses. Be blessed this week, my friend. Remember, God meets you right where you are and gives you what you need. Until I see you again, my friends, have a great week. Keep looking up, and I'll see you later.